Welcome to Simple Conversations with ASG.
So tell me, who is Diego Zanella?
Diego Zanella is a police officer in Washington State in US. Although I was born and raised in Italy, in Florence, where I did something completely different for 30 years. And I moved to Seattle, and I'm working and living in Seattle right now.
What's annoying you this week, Diego?
Couple of things. Maybe the biggest one is that a couple of days ago, I was walking my dog and listening to podcasts. I love podcasts, scientific podcasts, history, everything. And they were talking about a study conducted on the East Coast of the United States, one of the universities. And they said that young adults in the last 2 years, and for young adults, they were saying between 16 years old and 24 years old, read an average of one book per year. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm really old. But they check social media for 3 hours and 20 minutes every day. And it really annoyed me. I was like, that's the reason why US is not doing too well right now, because critical thinking is gone. And they said they're scrolling the pages like every 5 seconds, every 7 seconds, something like that. And so you don't really have enough information to start critical thinking about something, but they already have an opinion and they don't even take their time to grab a book and read about that topic. So I was pretty annoyed by that because I don't know, reading is one of my things. I couldn't believe that was the outcome of the study. So
yeah, I have a feeling that one book a year is being inflated by those who read many. I don't think there's many people at all around my age that read books at all. I read the odd time. I do like audiobooks more because I can do them on the go, but the amount of people that I would ask them, like, when's the last time you picked up a book or read or listened to an audiobook, and they'll genuinely will say like almost primary school, like at 10, 11 years old when you had to for homework. I don't know why, because like there's a lot of stuff you can learn on social media, but I don't think they realize that there's a lot of things you're not allowed to say on social media that you can write it in a book. So most of the information you need is in books, like, or maybe it's the education systems pushing them away from it. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But this was something that kind of bothered me because, like I said, if you want to learn about something deeply, not just, the title of some social media post, you should start to read. You should start to listen to some podcasts, made by professionals. And so you can have an opinion, and we can have different opinions. Don't get me wrong, of course, but at least you are informed on something that you are writing on your TikTok or Facebook. Well, Facebook is for old people, I guess, but so, yep.
Do you think podcasts are kind of becoming like digital books almost in a way? It kind of does seem like a lot of those authors that would write extensive knowledge into like topics, they're kind of getting on podcasts now so they can be asked the questions by people who have a little bit of knowledge on the subject but not enough to be an expert.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I really like podcasts because, well, first of all, allows me to walk with my dog for 45 minutes, so I love it. But if you get really professional podcasts, usually the host has an intelligent guest, and they're talking about something, and maybe the next episode is completely different. So you learn something because there is an expert who is telling you maybe the experience, the knowledge. They're talking about what kind of job they have. So I think you can gain a lot of knowledge through podcasts. So yes, I think we are evolving in that direction, and I like that. And so I'm all for podcasts. It's not just I'm for books, and so I don't like podcasts. Absolutely not. The two things can be combined, and as long as they enhance your knowledge about a topic, I'm perfectly fine. And actually, it's very enjoyable.
Great. We'll get into your story and who you are and what we're here to talk about today, because we could ramble about this for a long time, but this is quite a fascinating journey you've been on, because there's not many Italian special forces entrants that transition to the American Police Academy. Tell me about how you came from Italy to here and how you felt coming over here. Or to United States, sorry, here. Oh, geez, all Irish fans have went at me here now. I'm saying I'm from America. I lost myself a second.
Yeah, it's a strange, pretty peculiar journey because, like I said, I was born and raised in Italy. And I was there for 30 years. I had my own business, completely different from what I do right now. I had my house, my friends, my girlfriend, everything. And eventually I met a woman, a wonderful woman, and she is from Seattle. And so we did a long distance dating, but really didn't work too well. And we knew that we needed to decide one country, at least one continent. And so we were like, okay, who is the most flexible person, me or you? And I thought, okay, I can come to US, learn English, and do something. And so we decided to start our life together in Seattle, where she lived. And it went well because, of course, it was difficult to learn a new language when you're 31. It's a pretty big obstacle. But it went well, and I was actually an electrician. I was working in the electrical field for a few years, and it seems a little bit of a cliche, and I understand that. But after a few years, I was like, I need to give back to this community, this country that you know uh, welcomed me. And so I was like, what can I do to help? And so I was thinking maybe I can go in the military because I had military experience in Italy. I was with the special forces, and I was like, maybe fireman, maybe I don't know, something that can help. And the police work was really interesting to me. And so because I was pretty familiar with weapons, I was like, maybe that's the natural progression. And so my wife wasn't very happy because she didn't really want me to become a cop. But she was like, as long as, you think it's a good choice and makes you happy, we can try. So I went to the police academy in Washington State, South Seattle, and became a cop. And I was lucky. I changed different departments in the last 20 years. I did a little bit of everything. And right now I'm a police commander. I'm in charge of our patrol units. So it was an interesting journey.
When you were in the special forces, you were kind of deployed for jumping out of planes and helicopters, and that's quite a niche role. How did you manage to fall into that? Did you choose it, or was it kind of pushed in that direction?
Well, that's a good point because when I was young in Italy, it was mandatory to do 12 months in the military. And you couldn't decide where to go. They just tell you where to go, and that's your task for the next 12 months. And I always wanted to be part of the special forces. So I asked to become a paratrooper, and luckily they accepted my request. And so I went into the army as a paratrooper. And from there, I got selected with the special forces. So it was a little bit more challenging than just the regular paratroopers because you had to do a little bit of everything. Like you needed to be comfortable in the water, in a cold climate, or, climbing, and of course, expert with weapons. Pretty interesting job, honestly. I really liked it. I had the possibility to travel in foreign countries, and I think it was very good because I was in early years. I was 21 when I was going all over the world, and it was pretty interesting. You mature quickly because you see all these horrible places, and you come back to your country. You're like, I'm pretty lucky. I live in a pretty good place. So you get mature very quick. And so I finished. Everything was, like I said, a very good career, but they didn't pay too much, honestly. So I was like, it's something that it's stimulating for a young man, but after a while you think, okay, well, how can I see myself in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? And so I was like, maybe I did my time. It was a good experience. I did a lot of cool things. So I think I'm done with that. That was a good choice. So I went back in the private industry. And like I said, I was an electrician. I had my own business for a few years.
So when you then got to America, where you went to do your police training, did you find the training slightly similar, or was it completely different with little components that were crossing over?
So the portion related to weapons was very, very similar. So I was lucky because I was already familiar with weapons, so I didn't have any problems. I didn't expect, and I don't know why, because should have expected, but I didn't expect so much study about law. And, you have to know a lot of the current laws and current procedures and how to do police work. And you have all these movies out there, and you're like, I think I have a good idea how police work is. So you go there and you have no idea, because it's a very challenging time. In Washington State, the academy is 750 hours. And you do a little bit of everything. You do a lot of law, of course, but you do a lot of things that you don't think about, like de-escalation techniques, and you talk about mental illness, and you talk about all these things that you don't expect when you join the force, because you think about police work like you see on the movies, so jumping fences and catching the bad guys, which is true. It's part of our job, but it's a very small percentage, believe it or not. The majority of time that you spend as a patrol officer is helping people.
Yeah.
People call 911. US is 911. Call 911 because you don't know what to do. You are in the middle of a crisis, or somebody who is in the middle of the crisis, and you call the police. So I was kind of impressed that police officers nowadays have to be like a 360-degree people. Like, they have to know the law, but they have to know how to talk to somebody who is in the middle of a crisis. They have to know how to de-escalate with somebody who has a knife, or they have to do advanced first aid because somebody just try to commit suicide. And the spectrum is huge. It goes from respond to a barking dog that is bothering a neighbor to a homicide. And so you need to do a little bit of everything. Of course, large departments have specialized units, but for the most part, the patrol officer who responds every day to 911 calls needs to know a little bit of everything. And the academy tries to help you to understand how it works and to be proficient in your job.
Do you think the academy does a good enough job of training you to deal with people in those situations of panic, or do you kind of have to rely on a little bit of what you've learned through your life of dealing with people outside of police work that are in those situations?
It's a very good question. And I'll tell you why. There are some stats that are saying that 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 5 calls are somehow related to mental illness. So although you think that, it's a theft, or maybe, it's a fight, or maybe it's a disturbance, you go there and it's actually a crisis. It's a mental crisis. So the academies in US are doing a good job in preparing you, but of course, you are not a specialist. And so you are not a professional in the mental health field. So it's tough. We realized probably in the last 10 years that we needed to do something different. And so some progressive departments, and I'm lucky that I work for a progressive department right now, hiring basically experts. And so they, we have social workers who are coming to our calls. And when we respond to a call where somebody is in crisis, well, we don't have to intervene. We can step back a little bit, allow the social worker to go to the scene. Of course, we want her or him to be safe, but he or she can talk with the personal people who are in crisis and try to find solution, trying to provide some sort of services, try to see things in a different way. So now the person who's in crisis doesn't see just a uniform person in front of him with guns and pepper spray and baton and vest, and it looks like a ninja. No, they find a very professional person who can help. And so it's a win-win situation. And of course, we cannot teach our officers these skills because it will take years and years and years of academic studies, and it takes time. So it's better to have somebody who's a professional who can come with us and solve the situations.
Have you found that element of having someone who has studied solely in that background to be able to deal with the person in crisis first before there's any real action taken? Do you find that has helped the situation not escalate, maybe to the point of, like you said, like the people that are in the crisis, they'll see the gun, the badge, the uniform, and they might start panicking, maybe like lash out or something? Have you found that having that element of someone that speaks their language helps them not relax, but maybe they can see the situation for what it is?
Yes, you can see that almost daily in my department, and I think it's a great idea, because if you think about this, it makes sense. So let's say that we are in the middle of I'm in the middle of a crisis right now, and it could be everything. It could be because I'm over medicating myself, because I'm schizophrenic, or maybe I just had, a very horrible situation in my life or my family. So my emotions are really high and my reasoning skills are really low. Usually works in that way. So if I see somebody with a uniform, the first impact, the first 15, 30 seconds, it's going back to a crisis level. It's not like, I'm glad that there is somebody with a gun in front of me. That's not the typical reaction. But if I see somebody in jeans and sweater and, talking to me, I say, hey, I'm not a cop. You're not in trouble. I just want to know if there is something that I can do for you. And I totally understand if you don't want to talk to me, but I think it's a very good idea so we can solve this problem instead of having the police present. And, the cop behind me is just for safety because we don't know you. I'm pretty sure you're the best person in this neighborhood, but just safety. So the cop is going to stay there. It's not going to intervene. It's not going to talk to you. I understand that it's not exactly what you need right now. So tell me about you. What's going on now? Well, that changes completely the scene. Right. And so, we don't have to handcuff anybody. We don't have to use force. We don't have to send anybody to jail because it's, having a mental crisis. So, yes, it is definitely helping our job and the citizens. So it's a win-win situation.
How was it when you came to America and started working on the police force, when you started to see the volume of crime that was going on compared to in Italy?
If you are enjoying this episode, follow and rate the show.
So it was an eye-opening experience for me, honestly. I was living in a bubble, I'll tell you that. I was in Seattle. I was happy with my new wife. I was, I'm like, okay, I have to give back. And I had this romantic idea of giving back. And I finished the academy and I went to a very, very fast-paced police department. And I was going from one call to another, a lot of violent calls, a lot of shootings, stabbings, and, disturbances with weapons. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the reality of the job.
Movies came to life.
Yes, I was like, welcome aboard. Now it's you in your patrol car dealing with these people. So, and also after the academy, the basics, but you're not an expert in police work. So it takes years of experience before being comfortable with all the situation that you can have, because every single call is different. There are no two calls that are the same. They can be similar, but they cannot be the same. We are all human beings, so every single call is different. And so for me, it was an eye-opening experience. And, coming from Italy, where basically nobody can have a gun. Yeah, if you are a hunter, you can have the rifle, so you can go hunting on your weekends. But people don't go around with weapons on their hips. And I came in U.S. where basically one person out of 5 people that we encounter has a gun, either way in the car, pockets or in his bag. For me, it was an eye-opening experience because of like, whoa, now I have somebody with a gun and I don't know what this guy is thinking and what kind of problem he's having right now. So, your awareness of safety and danger zone, it changes completely. So, yeah, it was a good eye-opening experience for me, for sure.
Are you still surprised by how easily people seem to be able to access firearms?
Yes. Yes, because I have a different idea about guns. When I was at the academy, all the other recruits were from U.S. And so for them it was natural and normal to have guns and to
They knew what was coming.
Correct. And for me, it was different because literally for 37 years, total 37 years, if you take this special forces, I didn't have guns in my pockets, so it's like, oh my gosh, everybody has a gun here. And so it was a little bit disturbing too, because in Italy, you assume that nobody has guns. Yeah. And here you assume that everybody has a gun. So big difference. We are completely the opposite of the spectrum of gun laws. So yeah, interesting country for sure.
Do you think the academy done a well enough job of preparing you to deal with that, or did they maybe not understand the fact that you wouldn't be that you not have many run-ons with guns in your past, because they'll obviously know America is quite common now?
I think we should, this is a personal opinion, of course, but I think we should make the academies longer. If you think about Europe, but Europe is not the only one, but if you think about Europe, officers, I mean, people want to become officers, go to schools, go to police academies that are 1, 2, 3, 5 years before being by themselves. And here, after 6 months, basically from the date that you were hired, if everything goes well, you can be by yourself on patrol. And there are so many things about legal issues and weapon issues and societal issues that it takes more than 6 months to become proficient. And so I wouldn't mind to see academies that last like a year or 2 years before you go on the street. And I know that will be a burden for police departments because you have to pay the recruit and you don't have somebody on patrol. So how can you balance the two things? Easy to say, oh yeah, it would be great to have somebody at the academy for 2 years, but okay, we also need people responding to calls, and we need to pay the person who's at the academy. So it's a very complex problem. It's a complex issue, but I don't think that 3, 4, 5 months of academy, it's enough.
Yeah, 6 months. It's not even that it's such a short time space to learn everything. Being a police officer and seeing those things every day, you almost have to have an element of calmness about you that I don't know if you could develop in 6 months. I think maybe a year, 2 years it would need to take, because hearing you say that the academy is only 6 months, it kind of does shine a light on those police officers that do maybe strike out on people when they don't really know what they're doing, or they get angry very quickly. It makes sense a little bit in my head now why it's happening, because they haven't had enough time to deal with it. If they got a full year of experience, it could maybe they could see it from a different light, kind of like what we spoke about with the social worker calming down the person in crisis before you go over and ask them some questions. So do you think that maybe prolonging it in that way would help people deal with situations much better?
Yes, definitely. I agree with you. And that's one of the problems. And the second problem that I see is that the academies don't follow any standard regulations in US. So an academy in Alaska can be completely different from an academy in Florida. And so, like topics, length, type of instructors, you might have very different standards. Coming from Italy, where basically we have only the police and the carabinieri, they are the two major police forces in Italy, and they are both for the nation. So it doesn't matter if you are in Sicily or in Tuscany, it's same, people go to the same academy, they have the same standards, they have the same instructors, they have the same topics, the exams are exactly the same. It helps to standardize everything, all the response. So we don't have that in US. And so it seems a little bit strange that police work in Montana is completely different from police work, not completely, but different from Texas. And so maybe a standardized program might help to improve things.
There's something I've always been fascinated with police officers, because I feel like this is quite a hard thing to train somebody on, but it's clear that police officers have got enough experience under the belt with us that they can provide a calmness of it. But facing death or the potential of death quite regularly, not even just in yourselves, but in these things where you're being called out and you might find someone might be dead, or they're just been attacked and they're getting closer to death. What kind of training do you get to be able to see that and not react emotionally and react within what you need to actually do, how you need to actually keep them safe and give them the best chance of staying alive?
I love your question, because that was one of the problems that I saw, basically the difference between the academy and the reality. Because at the academy, they tell you, they teach you a little bit of everything. So yes, you will see some videos or pictures of dead people, bad traffic accidents or homicides. But one thing is to see that for an hour, talk about that topic with the instructor, have some homework to do, and after that you change completely the topic and you go to the range for 2 hours. Now you go out there on patrol and you see that people weekly. And, now you have to create some sort of shield around you, some sort of bubble, because we respond to my officer. I don't respond to calls anymore because I'm a commander, but my officer respond to awful things. And, they get traumatized, but they have to go to the next call because they have to. So they can't stop after, a death investigation and say, well, I'm stressed for the day, I'm going home. Well, somebody has to respond to the calls, 911 calls in your precinct, so you have to stay there. And I think we are changing right now. I'm very happy about that, because before, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there was more a idea of alpha male, alpha female. You go there, respond to call, take care of the, and move on. Suck it up. That's what you do for a lead. Well, all my officers are human beings. I don't have any robot, right? I don't have any AI going to any call. So I have to remember that they see horrible things, and we have to help them. So, as a commander, you go there and say, hey, I saw what kind of call you responded, yesterday. Do you need any help? Do you need to talk to a psychologist? Do you need any time off now? Because there was a very, bad call involving a 3-year-old guy. So it's like you have to understand that they might need some time off, or some other person to talk to who is not a cop, who is a professional. And that person deals with police officer in crisis all the time. So maybe he can give you some tools, because really they see the worst things that you can see as a human being. So we need to think about them too.
There's always that thing of the hardest people to find partners and relationships are cops, because they deal with so much with so little actual exposure to it in training, that whenever they go home, they find it so difficult to separate work from home. You hear all the time of police officers just never coming home, things like that. Do you think that having a little bit of better training before they actually get into patrol about these situations they're going to deal with, maybe not obviously seeing them live, but having a little bit of an idea of what they're going to face and how they have to put measures in to deal with them properly, would help them maybe away from the police force, in their personal lives, and even whenever they're on call and built up anger comes out, but they're only human, like you said, and people can only see so many bad things for so long before they start doing it themselves. Do you think maybe some rethink of training that way would help them overall, not just as a police officer?
Yeah, definitely. That would be a good idea. And I'll give you an example that it's working for some of the Scandinavian countries. Their training is a little bit different. So they go to the academy for a while. They do the academic stuff that needs to be done. But after that, they alternate the academic portion with real life. So they go back to the department, and they go with the senior officer, for example, for a month. And they experience calls like they were regular officers, although they are not graduated yet. So they are not officers, but they have a senior officer who explains what's going on. So now you see the reality, because for a month, 2 months, 3 months, you are in a police car and you really respond to calls, and you see what you will deal in few months or few years. And now you go back to the academy. You do more academic stuff, but you have a better idea of what to expect, basically, when you go out. And so maybe that can be also a good thing if you say, well, this is not for me. I can't see a dead body every month, every week, every day. I can't. I just, okay, there is nothing wrong with that. It's such a strange job that it's perfectly fine if you say, no, I can't do that. It's like if you are a nurse and you do, some sort of internship or whatever it is, and you go to the hospital for a while, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect such a high pace and to see all these people dying. It's not for me. And maybe it is for you, but you are eased in this new profession because, you have the academy that alternates with real life. And so I think that can be a possibility, and maybe it will help to make our officers, ready or more ready for the real life.
With these calls that you're coming to, and we've mentioned kind of the severity of some of them and the people that you're going to have to deal with, have you ever been to a call and you've kind of feared that there's a chance this could spill over into my life outside of work, or this could follow me home kind of thing. Because I had Mike Evans here who spoke about it. He was a CEO in a prison, and he mentioned that he saw some things in the prison system that was insane, like people beating each other up all the time and different things, and he would have to step in and try and break it up. But he had fears at a few times that when the people got released, they were going to come and try and confront him about what he done in there, trying to help people and stuff like that. Have you ever had that kind of feeling?
Honestly, I didn't, but it's something that it's in your brain. It stays there for a while, especially when you're like, I hope I will not see this person again when I go to a restaurant with my wife and kids. You know what I mean? Especially if you arrest somebody, right? So, and it happened before. And sometimes officers don't want to live where they work. So they work in a specific town and they want to have their house and family in it, 20 miles or 30 miles from that town. So that it's very unlikely that you will see one of the people you arrest or you arrested. So there is that thing. And there is also the fact that some of the incidents will stay with you no matter what. So also, if you're not afraid of the person who committed the crime, but just to see that kind of crime, especially if it involves, of course, kids or it's just like we don't have switches. We don't go home and say, okay, I turn off the switch and I don't think about all the things that I saw. It doesn't work in that way. You bring a little bit of the bad things in at home. And you have to be careful on that because it can ruin your personal life for several reasons. For example, if you see all the bad things that a human being can do, you tend to believe that everybody's in that way, which is not true, right? Because the majority of the people are good people, but you see only the bad things. And my joke with my new officers, like, hey, nobody's going to call you for the birthday party to have a piece of cake. It doesn't work. They call 911 if something happens at the party, right? So don't expect to be called because, this family really loves the cops and they have, a nice party. And they said, hey, can you send a couple of officers so we can share some cake? It doesn't work like that. And so you see the worst thing and you think that everybody's like that. So you should have a switch, if you can, that says, hold on a second. You dealt with the worst part of the society, but the majority of the society is good people. And remember that. Don't forget that. And don't bring too gruesome things at home. And, your wife or your, husband doesn't need to have the details of a very bad call. But at the same time, talk a little bit about what happened today. Don't be like, everything's fine. No, it wasn't fine. It cannot be fine because he responded to 27 calls in 12 hours. And, 13% were horrible and 10% were really bad and 10% were, so no, it can't be. So just take your time to have a good relationship, to talk about what happened without going into details. And remember that the majority of people out there are good people.
As humans, we always associate PTSD with veterans and people who've served in armies and served for their countries. Do you think that we should spend some time talking about PTSD and police officers?
Yes. So there were studies conducted, I think, from the University of California. They were saying that in a regular person who's not associated with police work, the average is, I think it's 27 critical incidents in your life. So the death of somebody who is close to you, a traffic accident with injuries, something like that. So if you are very unlucky, you have 27 in your life, okay? And for an officer, you have an average of 30, 35, 40 per month. So it cannot be the same, right? So something stays with you. And I think we need to recognize that, and if you respond to a homicide, it's not a good thing. You can't say, I'm used to it because I've seen, 11 in the last 6 months. It doesn't change the fact that you saw somebody dead by somebody else. And so it's a very critical incident. So that's the reason why I like some of the departments. Mine is one of them. If there is something really big, we offer once again, services for our officers. We understand they're human beings. And if you need to talk to a psychologist, if you need to take some time off, we will adjust your schedule. We will send you to talk to somebody. So when you come back, you are, also if you're not 100%, you're pretty good. You can go back to patrol. And we cannot just say, well, suck it up. You're a cop. You see this all the time. Just go to the next cop. It doesn't work in that way.
The last topic I want to talk on, and I mentioned it before we started recording, and I'm not going to get into specifics of it because I think that the whole situation is pretty cruel, but I do want to talk about the crimes that seem to be happening in schools, and more importantly, in those that are under 18, the really young people that are still developing. And it's a crazy one to me, but when you see reports in other cities of school shootings and potential bomb threats at schools and people getting into crazy things like knife crime and stuff, are you kind of in your brain trying to figure out what leads people to do something like that? Because from the outside looking in, like it's crazy for me to even think of how a child escalates to that level.
Yes, it is crazy. And it was extremely strange to me, talking about active shooter situation. It's what we call in US and it can be at school, but it could be in a workplace, anywhere, right? And in Italy, we didn't have that. We still have very few every year. And coming here and having active shooter incidents like monthly or more than once a month, it's like, what's going on? What's wrong here? And it's interesting that personally, I'm a active shooter instructor. So I teach officers and also civilians how to respond to an active shooter if it happens in your vicinity. And it was very strange to explain to my brothers and sisters in Italy because they didn't have the concept of active shooter. They were like, what are you talking about? Somebody.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah, it just doesn't exist. Like, why somebody who is 16 will go to the high school and kill 11 other kids? It doesn't make any sense. Why somebody will go to his own church and try to kill, 10 people? I mean, or, your workplace. It's just a concept that is not there. Thank God. But it's not there. And coming here and being an active shooter instructor, and tell my family in Italy that I teach civilians how to respond in case of an active shooter. That's something else, and so you're like, maybe there is something wrong with our society. We need to go a little bit deeper and see why. And of course, it's a complex problem, so it doesn't have a simple solution. Usually, very complicated issues don't have one response. It's like, I know exactly how to fight, the active shooter issue. No, it doesn't work like that, but still incredible, And personally, I was unfortunately involved in an active shooter response in 2011. And of course, I'm not going to go into details because it was really bad. But at that time, I was working for the SWAT team, and I got a call from a commander say, "We have an active shooter in our town. Please come immediately." And to think about somebody who is fully armed, and it goes toward in that case was a football game where a bunch of kids were playing, and the idea was to kill as many people as possible. It's just unthinkable. I mean, it's like, yeah, we can talk about mental illness, we can talk about the amount of weapons we have, but overall, as a human being, it's like, what are we talking about? Somebody who wants to kill as many kids as possible? That's incredible. And so after a response, like, to go back to our topic, going back home after I worked for 20 hours that day, it cannot be a normal day the next day. It cannot. And if you pretend that is a normal day, it's because you are pretending, not because it's a normal day. So
that is something that I asked a criminologist about what motivates people in not just active shooter cases, but in those cases where they're going out to take lives of people they don't know. That is always something that fascinates me, and he's studied everything about the brain and criminals. He knows all their behaviors, knows every reason. He genuinely has no idea what it is, what happens. As someone who's inside the police force, whereas he's kind of contracted to the police. As someone who's inside it, and you deal with these people once they're arrested, have you guys came to even a ballpark idea of what the motivating factor is there? Because there's no connection really.
So when I was learning to become an active shooter instructor, I went to several classes, several training, because of course I needed to gain so much knowledge that I can teach the other people. And it was very interesting to see that all the studies, all the theories, all the interviews that criminologists had done with active shooters did not bring to a easy solution. And the spectrum of the offenders goes from, all sorts of different racial. I mean, in theory, we have the idea that it's a white male, maybe it's a young white male that is bullied at school. It's not always like that. It goes across ethnicity, across money. Rich people kill out, did active shooter incidents, and poor people did that. So gender is the same, and sexual orientation is the same. So there is nothing that's like, oh, if they watch or play video games that are violent. Yes, that can be a factor, but it's not the only factor. Or, well, if they were abused when they were kids, yes, that's a factor, but it's not the only factor. So if you put everything together, it's a big question mark.
Huge.
You don't know. Huge. We don't know. And I'm glad that they are doing studies, are talking to active shooters and who survived, and they want to know why. And just so far, we don't know. We just don't know. Which is tough because we cannot predict the future, right? So it's not like I have a hot spot where people sell dope. I will allocate more officers in that spot. It's pretty easy to predict something that happened in the past. But if you study the past about active shooters, you don't have anything that can be done to prevent the same thing in the future. So it's really strange phenomenon.
Have you got a last message to the audience before we wrap up?
Go ahead.
I'm asking you for one.
Oh, I thought you had some specific.
No, don't have anything.
No, one thing that I always say when I'm a guest to a program like yours is like, I would like to remind people that police officers are human beings. So when you see a clip of 15 seconds of a cop doing something wrong, well, you don't know what happened 2 minutes before, 2 hours before. You don't know anything about the situation. And the 15, 20 seconds of clip don't tell you the whole thing. And we are human beings. We make mistakes. But sometimes we start to, we go to work and we are already pissed off for something that happened at home, like everybody else, like you, like, everybody. So I'm not trying to justify bad behavior. I think bad behavior by cops should be punished, but don't assume that the cops are bad because you see 15 seconds on TikTok or whatever it is on X that shows a cop beating up somebody. You don't know anything about that situation. Maybe, is a rapist and he was chased by cops for the last half an hour. So don't justify, open mind about cops and learn, because it's the only way to understand exactly what's going on when there is a, police activity.
Follow your new favorite interviewer with the link in the description.